Welcome to QHSE Talks, the world's largest QHSE audio knowledge hub. Subscribe and be part of the movement.
Welcome back to QHSE Talks, where we turn safety knowledge into real-world understanding. Now, let me start with a quick question. When was the last time you found a safety book that you actually wanted to keep open on your desk? For most of us, safety manuals are packed with great information, but they can be dry, scattered, and hard to apply. And that's exactly why Woody David Yates decided to write the Safety Professional's Reference and Study Guide, 4th edition. This isn't your typical textbook. It's a powerhouse of practical knowledge built for the real world, whether you're preparing for your ASP or CSP exams, or you're already managing safety programs and just want a reliable reference to make your job easier. Yates brings decades of field experience, from the U.S. Navy and Army Reserves to mining, manufacturing, and even space industry safety. Every chapter reflects the kind of insights you can only get from someone who's done the work. He covers everything from industrial hygiene and electrical safety to ergonomics, risk management, and the math and statistics that help you make solid, evidence-based decisions. So in this episode, we're unpacking why this book has become a must-have for safety professionals, how it connects directly to your certification journey, and what makes it such a powerful learning tool for both the exams and real-world practice.
And maybe we should start with a bit of context about the certifying body itself.
Good idea. We're talking about the BCSP, the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. Been around since, what, 1969?
That's right, 1969. They're the ones setting the standard. And this guide, it really focuses on two main credentials they issue.
Okay, let's break those down. First up is the ASP.
Yeah, the Associate Safety Professional. And it's important to note, this isn't just a temporary thing anymore. It's a full certification.
Right. And it signifies what, exactly?
It basically means you're spending at least half your time doing professional-level safety duties. Things like, worksite assessments, carrying out proper incident investigations.
Evaluating hazard controls, that kind of thing?
Exactly, within, defined management systems. And the key hurdle is passing the Safety Fundamentals examination. That's your gateway to the ASP.
Okay, so that's the ASP. Then there's the big one, the CSP.
Right, the Certified Safety Professional. That's the top tier, recognized all over the world.
And holding that CSP means you're authorized to use the title, the credential.
Yeah, and you find CSPs everywhere. Heavy industry like petroleum, construction, but also healthcare, manufacturing, government roles, military.
So pretty diverse fields.
Very diverse.
Yeah.
And often they're the ones managing the entire environment, health and safety, or EH&S, program for a large company, sometimes covering 1,000 employees or even more.
Wow. So they're not just managing risks day to day, they're actually setting the safety strategy for the whole organization.
That's it, exactly. It's a strategic role.
And something that really hits home about how serious these credentials are is just the requirements to even sit for the exam. It's tough.
Oh, it's stringent. This isn't like getting a certificate over a weekend.
Definitely not.
You need a minimum of 4 years of safety experience.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker, how they define that experience.
Right. It has to be.
It has to be preventative, professional level, and safety has to be at least 50% of what you do, covering both breadth and depth of duties.
So it's not just handing out hard hats or checking boxes.
Not at all. You need to show you had real analytical responsibilities, decision-making power. You basically have to prove you've already been operating at that professional level before you can get certified.
Makes sense. You're validating existing expertise. Okay, so with that context set, let's really dig into the examination blueprints. Because understanding how these tests are structured, that's step one for preparation, right?
Absolutely paramount. It tells you where to focus your study time. Let's start with the ASP exam, the Safety Fundamentals test.
Okay, how's that broken down?
Wisely, I think. It's split into 7 domains,
Yeah.
and the weightings immediately tell you what's non-negotiable.
And the biggest one is?
Safety management systems comes in at 23%.
Okay, that's substantial.
It confirms that understanding how safety fits into the bigger business picture, policy, commitment, continuous improvement, that's absolutely core, even at this fundamental level.
What really jumps out at me, though, is how much math there is, even here.
That's the critical piece. Domain number 1, mathematics, is weighted at 18%.
18%. That's the single biggest quantitative domain on the ASP.
Right. It's almost as big as safety management systems. It's basically a warning shot, isn't it?
Yeah, it says you have to be comfortable with calculations, units, basic physics.
You have to be fluent. No getting around it. The other domains fill out the technical picture. Environmental management is 15%, ergonomics at 13%.
And then fire prevention and occupational health.
Both at 11%. Yeah. And finally, training, education, and communication is 9%. Important, but the lowest weight.
So the takeaway for the ASP is you can't just rely on the softer skills. You absolutely need the math and the management systems understanding.
That's the bottom line. Master those two and you're well on your way.
Okay, that sets the baseline. Now let's look at the CSP Blueprint, the Advanced Application Test. How does the knowledge requirement shift for the CSP?
Well, the CSP demands synthesis, application, across a much broader range of specialized topics. Interestingly, the math gets more complex, but the weight of Domain 1, Advanced Sciences and Math, actually drops a bit.
Oh, really? How much?
Down to 9.95%.
So why is that?
Because the exam basically assumes you've got that foundational math from the ASP.
Right.
Now, the focus shifts to applying that math within, complex risk management scenarios, system safety analysis.
Got it. So it's less how to calculate and more how to use the calculation strategically.
Precisely.
So if the direct math focus shifts slightly, what are the big strategic areas on the CSP? Where's the weight?
Well, Domain 3, risk management, is huge. That's 14.49%.
Yeah.
A CSP has to be able to quantify risk, prioritize it for the organization.
Makes sense.
But the single largest domain actually is Domain 4, advanced application of key safety concepts. That's 14.69%.
Okay, advanced application. That sounds like where the real detailed knowledge comes from.
That's where the rubber meets the road, yeah. It's demonstrating that deep technical understanding of things like system failure analysis, emergency preparedness, control theory.
Okay, if someone listening is trying to zero in on that massive Domain 4, what are some specific knowledge nuggets they absolutely need? What makes it advanced?
It's moving beyond just identifying hazards reactively.
Yeah.
You have to get into proactive failure prevention.
Right.
So that means mastering formal system safety analysis techniques.
Yeah.
You need to understand and be able to interpret the results of things like fault tree analysis, FMEA, the safety case approach.
Okay, let's maybe quickly clarify those acronyms. They're pretty core to advanced practice. What's the basic difference between, say, fault tree analysis and FMEA?
Good question. Fault tree analysis, or FTA, is deductive. You start at the top event, the big disaster you want to avoid, like pump failure causes explosion.
Right.
And you work backwards, deductively, identifying all the possible contributing events, linking them with logic gates and A&D gates or gates. It's top down. Why might this bad thing happen?
Okay, so FTA is top down, deductive. What about FMEA?
FMEA, failure modes and effect analysis, is inductive. It's bottom up. You start with individual components, like a specific valve or sensor, and ask, okay, if this part fails, what are the effects on the rest of the system?
Ah, so it looks at the consequences of individual failures.
Exactly. And it helps you prioritize which components are most critical based on the severity and likelihood of their failure modes. Helps you focus mitigation efforts. The CSP expects you to know both approaches inside out.
Got it. What else falls under that advanced application umbrella?
Beyond those techniques, you need to grasp advanced management concepts, specifically things like ISO 14000 for environmental management,
Okay.
ISO 45001 for occupational health and safety, and the U.S. standard, ANSI Z10. You need to know how these systems are structured and audited.
And there's also a specific domain for law and ethics.
Yep, Domain 9, weighted at 7.33%. This covers things like the BCSP's own code of professional conduct, making sure you understand your legal duties, ethical responsibilities.
It really reinforces that move from just technical know-how to strategic ethical leadership for the CSP.
Absolutely.
So given this huge scope, let's talk preparation. What's a realistic time frame for someone aiming for these certs?
Well, Yates' guide is pretty upfront about it. For the average person, and this assumes you already have a decent background, comfortable with algebra, trig, basic physics, chemistry, business stuff.
Right, the prerequisites.
Exactly. For that person, the guide suggests around 6 months of dedicated study.
6 months. That's a serious commitment.
It is. And it's not casual reading. It means sustained effort, juggling multiple disciplines.
And what's the biggest pitfall, the critical mistake people make when studying?
Ah, the classic mistake. It feels comforting, but it's deadly for your exam chances. People tend to study what they're already good at.
Right, you gravitate towards your strengths.
Exactly. If you're a chemical engineer, you'll spend hours happily reviewing chemistry. But that doesn't help you pass the ergonomics section or the finance part.
So the strategy has to be
Ruthless self-assessment first. Use practice exams, diagnostics, identify your weak areas, and then you focus almost exclusively on those weaknesses. until you bring them up to scratch. You need minimum competency across all the weighted domains.
That's really sound advice. Focus on the gaps. Okay, test day itself. You're in the chair, the clock's ticking. Any tactics for maximizing your score?
Pacing is absolutely critical. The guide suggests a 3-pass approach.
Okay, pass 1.
Go through and answer everything you know immediately, or can solve very quickly. Nail the easy points first. Builds confidence, builds your score bank.
That's 2.
Go back to the ones you skipped. The harder ones that need more reading, more complex calculations, or just more thought. Mark the really tough ones you're still stuck on.
And pass 3, for those really stubborn questions.
This is vital. On the 3rd pass, you must select an answer for every single question you left blank or were unsure about.
Even if it's a guess?
Absolutely. With 4 multiple-choice options, a blank guess gives you a 25% chance. Leaving it blank gives you a 0% chance. Plus, sometimes reading a later question might trigger something, give you a clue or a formula that helps you answer an earlier one you skipped. Never, ever leave an answer blank.
Good point. And I remember the guide mentioning something specific about equipment, which seems basic but could be crucial.
Yes. Your calculator. It's probably the single most important physical item you bring.
Why 2 calculator?
Bring 2 approved calculators just in case one battery dies mid-exam. Imagine the panic.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But even more important than having a backup is practicing with the calculator you plan to use extensively beforehand.
Why is that so critical?
The exams, especially the CSP, involve a lot of calculations. Logarithms, square roots, trig functions. If you're spending 30 seconds fumbling around trying to find the right button for an inverse sine function, you're just burning precious time.
Time you don't have.
Exactly. That calculator needs to feel like an extension of your hand. I actually heard about someone whose exam pretty much fell apart because their brand new calculator battery died halfway through. Practice, practice, practice with your tools.
Okay, let's dive into some of that core technical foundation. Section 2 in the guide really hits the math. Physics, industrial science. You cannot escape the math, can you?
Absolutely not. Yates is clear. A solid working knowledge of algebra and trigonometry is non-negotiable.
Let's start with the language of science itself. Exponents, logarithms. Why are they so dominant in safety?
Well, logarithms are just fundamental because they let us handle enormous ranges of numbers effectively. Think about noise levels, light intensity, even radiation sometimes. The scale is huge.
Right.
We need to know those basic log rules cold, like the product rule. Log base B of M equals log base B of M plus log base B of N.
And the implication of that is?
It means logs let us turn multiplication, these exponential relationships, into simple addition, which is much easier to work with. Yeah. When you're using the decibel scale for noise, for instance, that's a log scale. A 10 dBB increase isn't just a little bit louder, it's 10 times the sound energy. Logs help us manage that.
Makes sense. And dealing with units, particularly in industrial hygiene, there's that subtle difference between scientific and engineering notation.
Yeah, they can trip people up. Scientific notation is just a number between 1 and 10 times the power of 10.
Right.
Engineering notation is a specific type where the power of 10 has to be a multiple of 3. So you use exponents like 10 to the 6th mega, 10 to the 3rd kilo, 10 to the minus 3rd milli, 10 to the minus 6th micro.
Which aligns with the standard SI prefixes we use all the time.
Exactly. Micrograms per cubic meter, milliliters. That's the daily language for sampling results, and it's built on engineering notation.
Okay, let's pull out a really practical example where the math, specifically trig, directly impacts safety. Calculating sling loads.
Ah, classic. And absolutely critical knowledge for anyone involved in rigging or lifting operations.
So walk us through the example from the guide. A 1,200-pound object, 2 slings.
Right. Imagine a 1,200-pound object, and it's being held by 2 slings. Let's say the slings are attached at a pretty shallow angle, maybe 30 degrees from the horizontal.
Okay, 30 degrees. Seems like a decent angle.
You'd think, but the force gets magnified significantly. First, let's assume the load is split evenly, so each sling supports half the vertical weight, right? 1,200 divided by 2 is 600 pounds vertical force per sling.
Okay, 600 pounds vertical, but that's not the tension on the sling itself.
Exactly. That's just the vertical component. We need to find the actual tension along the sling, which is the hypotenuse of the force triangle.
And that's where sine comes in. So
you got it. Sine of the angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. So sine of 30 degrees equals the opposite side, the 600 pounds vertical force, divided by the hypotenuse C, the tension in the sling.
So sin 30 degrees equals 600 C.
Right. Rearrange that to solve for C. C is 600 pounds sin, 30 degrees. And the sine of 30 degrees is exactly 0.5.
So C equals 600, 0.5, which is 1,200 pounds.
Bingo. Each sling is experiencing a tension of 1,200 pounds, the entire weight of the object, just because of that 30-degree angle.
Wow, that's a massive implication if that angle was even shallower.
The load would increase exponentially. It could easily exceed the sling's capacity. That's why safety pros must understand basic trig. It tells you immediately if your rigging setup is creating dangerous hidden forces.
Okay, moving from pure math to chemistry and gas laws. This is the bedrock for so much of industrial hygiene, isn't it? Assessing exposures.
Absolutely fundamental.
What basic chemistry facts do you just have to memorize?
You absolutely need to know the atomic weights of the common elements. Not just for fun, but because you need molecular weight to figure out things like vapor density.
Which tells you if a gas will rise or sink.
Exactly. So you need hydrogen, H is 1, carbon C is 12, nitrogen N is 14, oxygen O is 16, sodium Na is 23. The guide lists the key ones.
And this leads to the concept of the mole.
Right. 1 mole of anything is Avogadro's number, $6 air and 2 times 10 atoms or molecules. And knowing those atomic weights lets you calculate molecular weight. Take carbon monoxide, CO. Carbon is 12, oxygen is 16, so CO has a molecular weight of 28.
Okay, and why is knowing that CO is 28 so important?
Because the average molecular weight of air is about 29. Since CO28 is slightly lighter than air, 29, it will tend to rise and dissipate, rather than pooling near the floor. Knowing the vapor density dictates where you place your gas monitors. Critical stuff.
And then we have the gas laws governing how gases behave under different conditions.
Yep. You need Boyle's law first. P1V1 equals P2V2. At a constant temperature, pressure and volume are inversely related.
The safety angle there.
NA. Think compressed gas cylinders. If you somehow decrease the volume the gas occupies, the pressure inside goes up proportionally. That impacts cylinder integrity, potential for rupture.
Right. And the other big one is the ideal gas law.
PV, nRT. Pressure times volume equals moles times the gas constant times the temperature.
And the crucial thing here isn't just knowing the letters.
It's the units. For the ideal gas law to work correctly, your variables have to be in specific units. Pressure in atmospheres, volume in liters, LTM. Temperature absolutely must be in Kelvin K, not Celsius or Fahrenheit.
And if you forget to convert, say, Celsius to Kelvin,
your whole calculation is garbage. Your estimate of how much gas is in a space or how much ventilation you need for a confined space entry, it'll be completely wrong.
Right.
Potentially dangerously wrong.
Okay, the last pillar of this foundational section is mechanics. Forces, motion, energy. Let's start with work.
Right. And in physics, work has a very specific definition. It needs 3 things: a force, a displacement, and the force has to cause that displacement along the same line.
So if I'm just holding a heavy box perfectly still.
You're exerting force, sure, but you're doing 0 work in the physics sense because there's no displacement.
Got it. And how does this relate to safety?
We're often concerned with energy transfer. Kinetic energy, the energy of motion, is key. KE equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared, MV202.
That squared velocity term is huge, isn't it?
Massive. It means even a small increase in speed results in a big jump in kinetic energy. That's why speed limits are so fundamental for vehicle safety. Reducing speed drastically reduces the energy involved in a potential crash.
Makes sense. And what about calculating work done specifically against gravity? Thinking about falls.
Yeah, that's crucial for fall protection. Work done due to gravity is simply mass times g, the acceleration due to gravity, and g is a constant, $9 8 millisecond 28 and $32.02 28 or $32.25 over 2.
So the work done or the potential energy stored depends directly on the height.
Exactly. And that constant acceleration tells you how quickly someone speeds up during a fall. The fall distance determines the energy that the fall arrest system needs to absorb safely.
Okay, last mechanics bit. Force and friction. Applies everywhere from pushing boxes to machine guarding.
Always comes back to Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration. But friction is the force that resists motion.
And the equation for that.
Frictional force equals ma times n, where Donald's is the coefficient of friction between the surfaces and n is the normal force, the force pressing the surfaces together.
Let's use the guide's example. Coefficient of friction is 0.3, side force is 200 newtons.
Right. So the normal force n is 200 n. The frictional force resisting movement is 0.3 times 200 N, which equals 60 newtons.
So you need more than 60 newtons of force just to get it moving.
Precisely. Understanding friction is key for designing safe material handling procedures, ensuring machinery brakes work effectively, preventing slips. You need to calculate if the friction is enough to stop unwanted movement.
All right, moving into the more specialized domains now. Section 3 hits industrial hygiene hard, starting with toxicology and exposure. And I think those three key terms, toxicity, hazard, risk, often get jumbled. Let's get crystal clear definitions.
Yeah, they're absolutely distinct. And a safety pro must understand the difference. Toxicity is inherent. It's the substance's built-in capacity to cause harm, like how poisonous it is.
Regardless of exposure.
Regardless. Hazard, though, brings in exposure. Hazard is the potential for that harm to actually happen. It's toxicity plus the likelihood or pathway of exposure.
Book your uranium example. High toxicity, but low hazard if it's shielded.
Exactly. And then risk takes it a step further. Risk is the quantification of that hazard. It's an estimate, often a probability, of harm occurring under specific conditions, like a 1 in 100,000 odd chance of developing cancer from a certain exposure level.
So the safety professional's job is managing the risk, usually by controlling the hazard, the exposure, because you can't change the inherent toxicity.
That's it perfectly. Control exposure, mitigate hazard, manage risk.
And how do these harmful agents actually get into the body? The routes of entry are critical.
4 main routes. Number 1, and usually the most significant in occupational settings, is inhalation, breathing it in.
Right, through the lungs, alveoli, into the bloodstream.
And the critical factor here is breathing rate, or tidal volume. At rest, you might breathe 8-10 liters of air per minute, but doing heavy physical work,
It goes way up.
way up. It can jump to 120 liters per minute or even more. So if there's a contaminant in the air, a worker doing strenuous labor could be inhaling 10 or 12 times the dose compared to someone sitting at a desk in the same air. That drastically increases their risk.
That's a huge factor. What are the other routes?
Ingestion swallowing it, often through contaminated hands or food. Absorption soaking through intact skin. Some solvents are notorious for this.
Like carbon tet?
Yeah, things like that.
Mm.
And finally, percutaneous or intravenous injection, usually accidental, like a needle stick injury in healthcare.
Which bypasses all the body's defenses.
Completely. Straight into the bloodstream. Requires totally different controls, like Sharps management programs.
Okay, next concept. Dose response. The idea that the amount of exposure influences the effect.
Right. Typically shown as that S-shaped sigmoid dose response curve. More dose generally means more response up to a point.
And the classic metric here is the LD50.
The lethal dose 50, the dose that kills 50% of a population of test animals. Now here's where a safety pro needs to think critically.
How so?
LD50 measures acute lethal toxicity in animals. But our primary job is usually preventing chronic, non-lethal illness in humans over long-term, lower-level exposures.
So LD50 isn't always the most relevant metric for setting workplace limits.
Exactly. That's why we rely more heavily on things like threshold limit values, TLVs from ACGIH, or OSHA's permissible exposure limits, PALs. These are designed to protect nearly all workers from any adverse effect over a working lifetime, not just prevent immediate death.
Got it. A different goal, so different metrics. Now, what about chemical mixtures? It's rarely just one thing in the air.
And the effects are rarely just additive. 1 + 1, 2. You have to worry about interactions.
Like synergistic effects.
Right. That's the classic $2 + 2 = $10 scenario. 2 chemicals, maybe not so bad on their own, interact in the body to produce a much worse effect than you'd expect.
And potentiating effects.
That's $2 + 0 = $10. One substance seems harmless, the 0O, but when it's present, it dramatically increases the toxicity of the other substance, the 2.
So an air quality limit for chemical A might be totally inadequate if chemical B is also present, even if B seems innocuous.
Precisely. You have to consider the whole exposure profile. And we should also briefly mention carcinogens agents that cause cancer. Generally, it's assumed there's no safe threshold, no dose below which the risk is 0 due to how they damage DNA. Any exposure carries some theoretical risk.
Okay, to really nail down the depth required here, let's touch on a few specific substance-related illnesses and their unique details from the guide.
Good idea. Take asbestos, known carcinogen. The OSHA PL is incredibly low, 0.1 fibers per cubic centimeter.
And the sampling is specific too, right?
Very specific. You need a 0.8 micrometer pore size mixed cellulose ester filter, MCF. And the analysis must be done using phase contrast microscopy, PCM. That level of detail is testable.
Okay, another one. Beryllium.
Beryllium. Used in lightweight alloys, aerospace, nuclear tech. Inhaling the dust or fumes causes berylliosis, also called chronic beryllium disease or CBD. It's a nasty, debilitating lung disease.
And the PEL reflects that.
Extremely low PL, 0.2 micrograms per cubic meter, TM23, TM3. Tiny amounts can cause disease in susceptible individuals.
Wow. And mercury. What's the key hazard there?
With mercury, the big occupational risk is often inhaling the elemental vapor. It's a potent neurotoxin. Chronic exposure leads to peripheral neuropathy, tremors, and serious neuropsychiatric problems. The origin of the phrase "mad as a hatter" from hat makers using mercury compounds.
So for the exams, you need to know these specific agents, their PALs, the health effects, maybe even the sampling methods.
Yes, it demonstrates that broad, detailed knowledge base.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to another major physical hazard, noise and hearing conservation. Noise is just unwanted sound, right? Travels in waves.
Oscillations in pressure, yeah. And we quantify it in a few ways. There's sound power, which is the total energy the source emits, stays constant regardless of distance.
Okay.
Then sound intensity, which is the power flowing through a specific area, that does decrease with distance following the inverse square law.
And finally, the one we usually measure.
Sound pressure. That's what the microphone picks up, what our ears perceive, measured in decibels, dB. And for calculations, you need that reference sound power level committed to memory, 10-12 watts.
Got it. Now, when hearing loss occurs, we need to know the type of loss to understand if it's work-related.
Absolutely. There's conductive loss problems in the outer or middle ear, like a blockage or damaged eardrum. Sensorineural loss damage to the inner ear, the cochlea, or the auditory nerve. That's often noise-induced.
Then there's mixed CNS loss.
Right, central nervous system issues, or even psychogenic, which is not organic.
Yeah.
But within sensorineural, we also need to separate out presbycusis. That's the hearing loss that comes naturally with aging.
Versus
Socioacusis, that's hearing loss from non-occupational noise exposure. Think loud concerts, personal music players, shooting firearms without protection. The Safety Pro is focused on preventing the occupational component, the noise-induced permanent threshold shift, or NIPTS.
Okay, and the regulatory trigger for action is the STS, the standard threshold shift. What defines that?
The STS is critical. It's defined by OSHA as a change in hearing threshold compared to the employee's baseline audiogram of an average of 10 decibels or more at 3 specific frequencies, 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 hertz in either ear.
And if an STS occurs?
It's immediately a recordable injury on the OSHA 300 log. No ifs, ands, or buts.
wow.
And you then have obligations. Notify the employee, possibly refer them for medical evaluation, ensure they're using adequate hearing protection, potentially revise your program. It's a major compliance checkpoint.
And here comes the math again. Calculating noise dose and the time-weighted average, TWA. This looks like it requires those logs we talked about earlier.
It absolutely does. This is where that foundational math becomes essential. OSHA uses a formula to calculate the 8-hour TWA based on the measured dose, D. That formula is TWA $16.61 pellet. Log D100 plus 91, where D is the dose as a percentage.
So if a worker's dosimeter reads, say, 150% dose for the day.
You plug 150 in for D, so you'd calculate $16.61 times log 1.5 plus 90 to 1. If you can't confidently work with logarithms, you can't determine if someone exceeded the OSHA action level, or PEL, based on their measured dose. It directly impacts compliance and control decisions.
Really highlights how interconnected all this knowledge is. Okay, last topic in the specialized section. Thermal stressors, heat and cold. We usually focus on heat, but the body gains and loses heat in specific ways, right?
4 main ways. Radiation heat transfer through electromagnetic waves, doesn't need contact. Think sunshine or heat from a furnace. Convection heat transfer via movement of air or liquid across the skin.
Like wind chill.
Exactly. Conduction heat transfer through direct physical contact, touching a hot surface or a cold one. And finally, metabolic heat, the heat our own bodies generate through activity.
And the key principle is heat always moves from
warmer to cooler. Always. Understanding these mechanisms helps us design controls, like shielding for radiation or ventilation for convection.
This understanding is vital for managing heat illness, recognizing the progression. Let's walk through the stages, because distinguishing heat exhaustion from heat stroke is literally life or death.
It is absolutely critical. It often starts milder, maybe heat rash or heat cramps, but then it can progress to heat exhaustion.
What are the signs of exhaustion?
The key is the person is usually still sweating, often heavily, but their body is struggling. They might have low blood pressure, feel dizzy, nauseous, have a rapid, weak pulse, look pale and clammy. They might even collapse, but their core temperature regulation is still trying to work.
Okay, still sweating is key for exhaustion. What happens when it becomes heat stroke?
That's the medical emergency. The body's thermostat has failed. Core temperature regulation breaks down completely.
And the big sign is?
Often, though not always, the sweating stops. The skin might become hot, red and dry. The core body temperature shoots up rapidly, usually above 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
And this causes?
Central nervous system dysfunction, confusion, irrational behavior, seizures, loss of consciousness. This requires immediate aggressive cooling ice water immersion if possible, moving to air conditioning and urgent medical transport. Delay can be fatal or cause permanent damage.
Recognizing that change, sweating stops, core temp spikes, mental status changes is crucial.
Absolutely crucial.
And briefly on cold stress, the body loses heat the same 4 ways, but the illnesses are different.
Right. The concern is losing body heat faster than you can produce it. You get peripheral issues like chilblains, itchy, painful inflammation, or immersion injuries like trench foot from prolonged wet cold.
And the more serious systemic issues.
Hypothermia, when the core body temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or 35 Celsius. That affects brain function, muscle control. It's very dangerous. And frostbite, which is the actual freezing of body tissues, causing severe damage.
So managing both heat and cold requires things like work schedules, proper clothing, and acclimatization.
Yes, especially acclimatization. Getting workers gradually used to the thermal conditions before they undertake heavy work is a key preventative measure outlined in the guide.
Okay, let's shift gears now to Section 4. We're moving from the technical hazards to the bigger picture. System management, compliance, and organizational strategy. Essential for the CSP level.
Definitely. You have to understand how safety integrates with and ideally leads business operations.
And the core of any good management system, safety included, seems to be that PDCA cycle.
Absolutely. Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's the engine of continuous improvement, made famous by W. Edwards Deming, but used in virtually every quality management framework, including safety.
So plan is?
Plan. Set your safety objectives. Figure out the processes needed to achieve them. Do. Implement the plan. Run the processes. Check. Monitor performance. Measure results against your objectives. Conduct audits. Act. Take corrective actions based on what you found in the check phase, learn from it, and feed that back into the plan phase for the next cycle. It never stops.
It's a continuous loop. And what does Yates highlight as the key components of a structured safety management system, an SMS?
The essentials include a clear policy statement that shows top management commitment and allocates resources, an organizational structure defined who's responsible for what, safety assurance processes like audits, inspections, data tracking, and of course hazard identification and risk management procedures.
The guide also mentions Deming's 14 points.
Yeah, it references them as influential principles, things like driving out fear, breaking down barriers between departments, and, very relevant to safety, eliminating numerical quotas or targets that might incentivize bad behavior, like hiding injuries to meet a goal, and focusing on pride of workmanship.
Okay, next big topic. Accident causation and investigation. We have to start with the historical foundation, Heinrich's domino theory.
Right. Heinrich, back in the 1930s, gave us one of the first systematic ways to think about accident prevention, his 5 dominoes.
Let's list them.
Social environment inherited faults, then fault of person, leading to an unsafe act or unsafe condition which causes the accident, resulting in injury.
And the idea was remove any domino and the sequence stops.
That was the theory. Break the chain, prevent the injury.
Heinrich's main conclusion, that famous 88% of accidents are due to unsafe acts, sounds very blame-focused on the worker today, doesn't it?
It does, and that's where safety thinking has evolved significantly. While Heinrich was groundbreaking for his time, that 88% figure, based on old insurance data, is now seen as overly simplistic.
How so?
Modern system safety recognizes that the unsafe act is often just the final trigger. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. They're usually underlying latent failures in the system.
Latent failures being?
Things like poor design, inadequate training, unrealistic production pressures, faulty equipment, management decisions made long before the accident. These are hidden weaknesses in the system, just waiting for an act of failure, like that unsafe act, to bring them crashing down.
So the CSP needs to look beyond the immediate action to find those systemic root causes.
Absolutely. The investigation needs to dig deep into the management system failures that allowed the unsafe act to occur or didn't prevent its consequences.
Then when conducting that investigation, what's the absolute primary goal?
It is always, always, always to prevent recurrence. Full stop.
Not to assign blame.
Definitely not. Not to satisfy insurance, not to prepare for lawsuits. If people think they're going to be blamed, they clam up and you never find out what really happened.
So the process should be
methodical. Secure the scene. Interview witnesses purely for fact-finding. What did you see, hear, do? Analyze the sequence of events to identify direct causes, indirect contributing causes, and those fundamental root or basic causes in the system. Then write a report with clear, actionable recommendations to fix the problems.
Okay, this leads us naturally into regulatory compliance, specifically OSHA record-keeping and citations. First, what makes an injury or illness officially recordable? This drives a lot of metrics.
Yeah, the OSHA 300 log criteria are very specific. It's recordable if it results in death, days away from work, restricted work activity, or transfer to another job, medical treatment beyond first aid.
Okay, what counts as beyond first aid? That's often a gray area.
OSHA defines it pretty clearly. Things like stitches, prescription medication using rigid splints, anything beyond simple cleaning, bandaging, non-prescription meds at non-prescription strength. Loss of consciousness is also recordable, as is any significant injury or illness diagnosed by a physician or other licensed healthcare professional, PLHCP, if it's work-related.
And the rule is, if you're not sure if it's work-related,
You record it first, then investigate. You have to keep it on the log until it's definitively determined by a medical professional or through your own review process to be non-work-related. When in doubt, record.
And the reporting timelines for severe incidents are very strict now.
Extremely strict. A work-related fatality must be reported directly to OSHA within 8 hours.
8 hours, that's fast.
Very fast.
Right.
And any inpatient hospitalization, meaning admitted to the hospital, not just ER treatment, any amputation or the loss of an eye must be reported within 24 hours.
And failure to report on time leads to big penalties.
Significant penalties, yes. OSHA wants to know about the most serious incidents immediately so they can potentially investigate quickly.
Okay, let's say OSHA does investigate and issues a citation. What's the process for appealing it for the employer and the employee?
Right. The OSHA area director issues the citation, classifying it serious, willful, repeat, etc., and proposing penalties. The employer has to post that citation near where the violation occurred for 3 working days or until it's abated, whichever is longer.
So everyone sees it.
Yes. Now, employees have limited appeal rights. They can officially contest the abatement date set by OSHA, arguing it's too long and doesn't protect them quickly enough, but they generally can't contest the citation itself or the penalty amount.
And the employer?
The employer has broader rights. They have 15 working days from receiving the citation package to file a formal, written notice of contest.
15 working days. That's key.
Critical detail. If they file that notice, they can challenge the citation itself, the classification, the proposed penalty, and or the abatement period. If they miss that 15 working day deadline, the citation and penalty typically become a final non-appealable order.
Okay, last major area in this section, hazardous materials regulations and environmental law. RCRA seems like the big one here.
It is. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, from 1976. It's the main federal law governing how we manage solid and especially hazardous waste.
And its defining principle is?
Cradle to grave.
Meaning
The generator of the hazardous waste is legally responsible for it from the moment it's created, cradle, through its transportation, treatment, storage, all the way to its final proper disposal, grave. You can't just hand it off and wash your hands of it.
And what makes a waste officially a hazardous under RCRA?
RCRA defines it based on listed wastes, specific industrial processes, or if it exhibits one of 4 characteristics. Easy to remember with the acronym ICRT.
ICRT.
Ignitable flash point below 140 degrees in Sanshak. Corrosive pH less than or equal to 2 or greater than or equal to 12.5, or corrode steel. Reactive unstable, explodes, reacts violently with water, generates toxic gases. And toxic, determined by a lab test called the Toxicity Characteristic Leaching Procedure, or TCLP, which simulates landfill conditions to see if harmful chemicals leach out.
And that cradle-to-grave tracking is done how?
Through a very strict manifest system. A multi-part form has to accompany the waste everywhere it goes, signed by the generator, transporter, and the receiving facility, ensuring accountability.
And we should also briefly mention CERCLA and SARA. They often come up alongside RCRA.
Right. CERCLA is the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act from 1980, better known as Superfund. And SARA was the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act of 1986.
And their focus is different from RCRA.
Yeah, while RCRA deals with managing waste being generated now, CERCLA and SARA are primarily about cleaning up past contamination, abandoned hazardous waste sites, spills, the legacy problems, the Superfund sites.
Got it. And one more environmental law. NEPA?
The National Environmental Policy Act. This one's about foresight.
Yeah.
NEPA requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impact of their proposed major actions before they take them.
Through things like environmental impact statements.
Exactly. EISs. It forces agencies to look at alternatives, consider environmental consequences, and involve the public in the decision-making process for major projects like building highways, dams, or large federal facilities.
Wow. Okay, wrapping this up, this deep dive into Yates's guide really drives home the incredible breadth of knowledge required for a CSP. It's staggering, really.
It really is. You have to be able to jump, like you said, from solving a log equation for noise
To knowing the PLL for beryllium,
to diagnosing heat stroke versus heat exhaustion,
to applying Deming's PDCA cycle.
and knowing that 15-working-day OSHA appeal window. It demands integration across technical, managerial, and regulatory fields.
It confirms that the CSP isn't just about knowing facts, it's about mastering system safety, applying advanced quantitative methods, understanding management theory.
It validates that you can operate at that strategic level, seeing both the big picture of the management system and the critical details, like that sling angle calculation.
So let's end with a final thought for our listeners to chew on, something rooted in that advanced risk management thinking. Let's talk system reliability.
Ah, yes. A core concept. When we analyze system safety, we often calculate the overall reliability based on its individual parts.
And if those parts are in series, meaning if any one part fails, the whole system fails.
Then the overall system reliability is the product of all the individual component reliabilities. You multiply them together, right system is R1 times R2 times dots times Rn.
Okay, so picture this. You have a safety system with, say, 6 critical components in series. A sensor, a valve, a logic solver, a pump, an alarm, and emergency shutdown. And you've sourced really good components. Each one individually has a reliability of 0.98. That's 98% reliable. Sounds pretty great, right?
Sounds fantastic for each individual part, but what happens when you put them all together in that series?
You have to multiply. 98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.981, or 19866.
And the result?
The overall system reliability of RICE system drops to only about 0.88, or 88%.
Exactly. That simple multiplication reveals a profound risk management principle. High individual component reliability doesn't automatically guarantee high system reliability, especially in series systems.
The chain is only as strong as its weakest link, or maybe the cumulative effect of all its links.
Precisely. So, the provocative thought for everyone listening is this. Reflecting on that reliability calculation, what single potential weak link, maybe it's an unwritten procedure, a gap in training, a latent management issue, something seemingly small, are you currently overlooking in your own workplace or safety program? What small thing, when combined with others, could be quietly eroding your overall system safety far more than you realize?
It's a sobering question and a perfect place to end our deep dive. Thank you for joining us as we mapped the knowledge required for the certified safety professional.